Next, we are going to have a little change in our lineup. Charlene Obenar, Executive Director from the New York Committee on Occupational Safety.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to testify. There were a couple of, I submitted a written testimony, which you all have in front of you, right?
Yes.
So I won't read too much from that. There were a couple of questions about union versus non-union statistics. You'll have bullet points on this in your document, but the union versus non-union difference is made very clear. Not only statistically, but any of the union folks in the room or folks not representing unions in the room know the difference. For example, today this hearing is significant. It's on Workers' Memorial Day. We have a rally tomorrow in front of a job site where a worker, Kristen Genesi, was, young man in his 20s, was actually in the service, had been in the service, and he came back and was quoted as saying that he felt like his job as working as a construction worker, as an elevator construction worker, was more dangerous than being in the service. And he died on the job. To kind of give you a visual of what happened with him, he was on an elevator, and the elevator got stuck, right? So this is kind of the floor, this is the elevator. So he's on the elevator here. His coworker goes, he jumps down, he lands, he walks away, he's fine. He goes to walk down, he jumps, he falls back, and he dies. He falls to his death. So, this is the kind of case that we highlight at Workers' Memorial Day to commemorate the worker that died, but to also say this worker didn't have to die. When we look at the statistics, that worker was obviously non-union, but in comparison, the union density in New York City is about 28%. So about 28% of construction workers are in a union. Now, the percentage of people who die on the job, about 80% of them are non-union. So the numbers don't add up. You can't kind of put one number and say, well, but there's a high union density in New York City. Well, more people die than should be dying who are non-union. And, to kind of further talk about what I believe to be not accidents, right, but actual preventable fatalities in New York City construction. When we analyzed in the past 10 years construction sites, and we looked at where are the fatalities, is there a correlation between fatalities and OSHA violations? There are. I mean, almost 90% of the fatalities that occur have coinciding OSHA violations. Why is that? Because people who die on the job die in preventable accidents. You see that time after time and time after time. And what we try to highlight as well is that who's at a disadvantage here? When someone dies on the job, are they more likely to be Latino? Are they more likely to be an immigrant? In our 2013 report that we published, we showed that indeed they are. Over 50% of the fatalities were of immigrant workers. When you combine immigrant workers and Latino workers, it goes to almost 70% of the fatalities. So these are pretty jarring statistics. And when you look at the entire United States as a whole, 60%, in the entire United States, we've got the industry employs 6% of U.S. workers, right? So in construction, 6% of U.S. workers, but it's 20% of the fatalities. In New York, it employs 4% of the workforce, and it's 20% of the fatalities. So it employs less of the workforce. It's an equivalent number of fatalities. And there are 2 Latino deaths every single day in the United States in construction. So again, that statistic is jarring, but these are preventable fatalities. These are preventable, and that's what we really want to highlight. So what are the solutions, right? I'm saying they're preventable. You all are in the legislature. I'm an advocate. What are the solutions? Well, the statistics are jarring, but we know that injuries and fatalities in construction decrease when there's an increase in inspections. So when agencies are well-funded, when they can do their jobs, when they actually have enough inspectors out there, it's less likely that you're going to see injuries. It's less likely that you're going to see fatalities. We also know that trainings work. While there is some degree of significance to OSHA 10 trainings, when we looked at 600,000 workers, 3.4% are injured on the job with OSHA 10s and 11% are injured without. So there's a difference there. It's not as significant of a difference as it is when you look at a full apprenticeship program, when you look at the union versus non-union difference, but it's a difference. Training does help. And we have laws in New York State that go above and beyond laws in other states that I believe we're all proud of, like the scaffold safety law. It's important. It does make New York State safer. Even though I'm talking about fatalities and I'm saying they're preventable and, I'm kind of decrying the situation, the scaffold law does make things safer. It makes things better than they would be without that level of protection. We also, something that I think would be very effective, the guys on the panel before me were talking about workers' compensation law. We all know there's, so many issues that we could address in the workers' compensation law and how it's currently administered. But at the same time, what about people who aren't paying workers' comp at all? What about these contractors? They're not even paying into the system. So they misclassify workers, they classify them as independent contractors, and they aren't protected. Their workers aren't protected. And then the workers themselves, when they get injured, what does that worker do? What can that worker rely upon? Does that worker then become, is the worker just kind of screwed? Well, if they don't know about their rights, they might be. If they don't know that their employer is responsible, if they end up just getting dropped off at a hospital and ending up telling them, I fell down, I was playing with my kid and I fell down. Well, yeah, then the worker themselves is just out of luck. So, we do believe that there are solutions to some of these issues. I want to applaud Gail Brewer's office for also working at the city level, putting together a construction safety task force. I know a representative from her office was here earlier. We're trying to think through innovative solutions. I applaud you all for putting together this hearing, but I firmly believe that if we have the will in the legislature, if we have the will at the state government, the city government, and particularly the federal government, which I know we're not here to talk about, but, OSHA's really hamstrung. They don't have the funding that they need to do their job. I think we could prevent a lot of these fatalities. I think we could have much safer jobs in New York for construction workers. So, we don't have to have a Workers' Memorial Day because workers don't die on the job. That would be our goal, and I think it's attainable. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Chairman Moyer, do you?
Sure. You spoke about how a lot of these violations are preventable. Have you seen in ways in which employers have actually been decreasing safety at the workplace that has been leading to a lot of these fatal falls and a lot of these injuries that we see on the job? And if so, how do you think we can counteract that?
I think the only way to really counteract that, besides the entirety of the workforce being unionized, would be to increase the number of inspections that occur. When you have inspections in a workplace, it is effective in making the workplace safer. So I would say just consistently more inspections, more funding to make sure that we can make that a priority.
And I'm just highlighting this because it's not a question, it's just more of how startling the statistic is that you mentioned about immigrant and Latino workers that are dying on the job. And they make up 25% of the New York construction workers, and they represent 39% of the construction fatalities. That's a startling figure, especially when we're seeing the abuse amongst immigrant workers. Have you seen that the trend is continuing to go in the direction where more immigrant workers are dying on the job due to the fact that there is a lack of training at these job sites?
I can't speak to this year's statistics yet because it's not out, but nationally, Latino construction fatalities increased from 182 to 233 so it was 182 in 2010 and 233 in 2013. So it's a pretty drastic increase, and it doesn't coincide with the increase in construction that's actually occurring. So I can't say to the 2015 numbers. I'm not sure, but I certainly think that it's possible.
Okay.
Bronson, Chairman Bronson?
Sure. I noticed that you were looking at a resource to get those statistics. What's the publication that you're looking at?
Well, this is NICOSH's report. So it's our 2015 report on construction fatalities. It's called The Price of Life. I can leave a copy with you guys. I didn't bring enough copies for everyone, but it's also on our website.
Okay. Do you have statistics in other industries besides construction industry?
This report just covers construction, but we do release other reports in other industries. NICOSH covers, all industries in terms of occupational safety and health.
And those reports are generally available on your website?
Yeah, we have a report section. You could download them. They're all
Great.
public.
So, if I can summarize your testimony, first of all, the statistics are more than jarring. They're alarming, and there's no reason why this should be happening. I just think this is devastating, the number of injuries and certainly the number of deaths, especially when you juxtapose that with the realization that most of it's preventable.
Absolutely.
So let's, in summarizing your testimony, I think what you're saying is if we have more inspections, if we have better training, and we have better oversight, we can do a better job of preventing these workplace injuries. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and as I understand it, both from the earlier testimony and otherwise, in the private sector, it's OSHA inspectors who do the inspection, and they're federal employees under the federal system. But here in New York State, we're one of only a handful of states where we have a PESH system where we do the safety for the public sector. That's correct?
Correct.
So through what we do in the state government, we fund those inspectors on the public sector, but it's the federal government that funds them in the private sector.
Correct.
Do we have any say on the number of inspectors or what job sites or how often they do inspections or anything of that nature?
No, but one of the great things about New York City is that we have the Department of Buildings, and obviously that's something that you don't have oversight at the state level. It's at the city level, but I think that you'd have to look at one potential option to explore is how you would highlight which fatalities are unsafe and which fatalities are getting more attention from OSHA. Now, there's no official way that you could do that. OSHA is a federal agency, so they have the authority to regulate themselves. But the question would be, how can the state help increase reporting on job sites, worker reporting on job sites of a lack of safety? How can we think about innovative programs to do outreach to workers so they know, hey, this is an unsafe job site, and they can alert the appropriate bodies to make sure that job site is being inspected. It would take OSHA, I think it's like something like over 100 years to inspect every workplace once. They don't inspect every workplace. A lot of folks know this. They inspect the workplaces that are the most hazardous. Sometimes you'll even be walking by an unsafe job site. I mean, we've all been there. We call 311 or we call our friends at OSHA. And unless it's an imminent danger, an imminent risk of danger, an imminent risk of death, they're not even going to check out the workplace. They just don't have enough resources. So if we can somehow, make sure that we're prioritizing the very unsafe job sites, the employers that are severe violators of OSHA regulations, then I think that we could do a little bit better. But this is also a federal issue. All of the agencies are going to have to be working together. I believe we can do a lot in New York State. I believe we can do a lot in New York City. But I think that we also have to do stuff at the federal level.
Is there any mechanism by which the New York State Department of Labor can request additional inspectors or additional funding to increase the number of inspections? I mean, you had mentioned, increasing reporting so that we can identify the problem better. But once we identify that problem, how do we then translate that into the resources, funding resources and labor resources to make sure that job sites are being inspected?
Yeah, well, I think that if we increase reporting, then what we can do is prioritize the unsafe job sites that would be highlighted. Obviously, it wouldn't address the resources question, but I think that you would be preempted by OSHA if you tried to address that issue of additional resources. I don't think you could do that at the state level.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, next we're going to have some actual workers in the industry. Jessica Suarez, graduate of the Non-Traditional Employment for Women, and Juan Hoy, who is an elevator worker.
Sorry.
Thank you. Jessica?
Good afternoon, Committee Chair Titus and Chairman Moya and Bronson. My name is Jessica Suarez, and I'm actually our Director of Strategic Initiatives at Non-Traditional Employment for Women. I'm speaking on behalf of Shirley Adracor, who's one of our graduates and a tradeswoman. She is a laborer with Local 731, and she was called to work, so that's why she's not here today. So I will give you her testimony. My name is Shirley Adracor, and I'm a graduate of the Pre-Apprentice Program, Non-Traditional Employment for Women, also known as NEW. I came to NEW for a career in union construction after having worked in the non-union sector making $9.75 an hour and no benefits. During this time, I was exposed to and witnessed a lack of proper scaffolding, lack of protection for the workers completing tasks, especially those in heights. Workers were often standing on pieces of wood and buckets in order to complete their assignments and were almost never provided PPE or personal protective equipment. Following my graduation from NEW, I was placed with the laborers, Local 731, where I am now receiving $20.75 an hour, in addition to medical benefits and vacation pay. I have access to the appropriate protective equipment and finally feel safe on my job. I, along with my brothers and sisters on my job sites, have close relationships with the safety staff who go above and beyond to ensure we are never put into compromising situations. Working in the union has drastically changed my life and the future of my family. I no longer have to fear for my life going to work and have become financially stable. That completes her testimony, but I would be happy to answer any questions about NEW. We're a pre-apprenticeship training program that trains over 400 women a year, the majority of which are minority, so over 82% minority. We serve the tri-state area, but primarily the 5 boroughs, and that completes my testimony.
Great, thank you. Juan?
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Juan Hoy. I'm an elevator constructor. And thanks to the training that I received from my apprenticeship program, I am here today to testify before you. In June of 2011, I was working at One World Trade Center when I fell from the 51st floor. I was fortunate, as part of my apprenticeship training, I learned how to properly use my safety harness, which I brought with me so you guys could see, and to show you that I was properly hooked up to a wire rope. And this is what held me up from the 54th floor down to the 53rd floor. And I see this all the time, that people are talking about wearing a harness, but they don't actually own or have a harness. And this is part of my safety training that they have established with us in the program from the very beginning. It was a small joke in the beginning that they would say you either tie or die, but it's a true statement in my case. I'd like to just finish here. Many workers are not so fortunate, and as I dangled over the hoistway, I was dazed and confused, and my 2 co-workers were unaware if I was even there or not. My awareness and the potential hazard and the training I received helped prevent me from being a fatal statistic. As my coworkers pulled me out of the hoistway to safety, I was grateful to know that I would be going home to my family that night. I would not be a newspaper article or a fatal statistic. And had I been trained, I brought my safety equipment with me to show everyone that this is the biggest thing that saved me that day. For those of us workers who are responsible that don't get this free equipment and don't get the training and aren't aware of the safety measures that need to be applied when you're on the job and it's just a bad case all around. Another thing that my apprenticeship training through the National Elevator Industry Program taught me is that if I was stuck on a platform or on the top of the car, do not try to jump down to the nearest floor. Wait and help will arrive. Tomorrow, on Workers' Memorial Day, one of the workers that will be remembered is Christian Ganesi. Christian is an Air Force veteran who had recently returned from Afghanistan when he fell down the elevator shaft to his death on May 5th of last year. Christian did not work for a responsible employer and did not have the benefit of the training that I received. There was no safety line in the hoistway. There was no harness on his back. When Christian jumped off the platform, he had not been trained not to jump to the nearest floor. Had Christian been trained, he would have known not to get into the elevator shaft without a safety line and not to jump, and still may have been here with us today. On October 23rd, an article ran in the Daily News highlighting a report that stated that while 41% of all construction workers in New York City identify themselves as Latino, 74% of construction fatalities victims are Latino. The article then goes on to say that contractors are not taking the responsible steps to protect their workers. Workers exposed to the same conditions and hazards should all receive the same training. Yet we know that Christian Ganesi, who died on May 5th, had only been in the industry for 1 month and worked for a contractor who did not participate in the state-approved apprenticeship program. The training that I received could have saved his life. In the elevator industry, workers, training, and public safety go hand in hand. Last October was an elevator passenger fatality in Hope Street in Brooklyn. Accounts of the incident say that the elevator was out of balance and that the brake was out of adjustment. The elevator being out of balance most likely dates back to the elevator's initial installation. Balancing of the elevator and maintenance of brakes are both part of the training that I received. The elevator maintenance contractor at that site does not participate in the state-approved apprenticeship program. There also were maintenance contractors at the site of another elevator passenger fatality only 14 months earlier. It is time for New York State elevator riding public and elevator workers receive the commitment from the safety that 34 states and the District of Columbia have given to the people. It is time to pass the Elevator Safety Act. This legislation sets minimum training standards for elevator mechanics in New York State, leading to a license. I would like to thank Assembly Members Moya, Bronson, and Titus for your commitment to this common sense life-saving act.
And thank you. And as I said in the beginning, our committee, we have advanced that particular act out of our committee, and we're looking forward to having it move forward in the process. I want to thank the perspective coming from employees for giving this testimony that we have here today. And I just wanted to ask, as employees, do you see more of your fellow employees like speaking out when you're in a situation at a work site where you think that there's some hazard that you feel comfortable enough to say, wait a sec, I'm not doing this, I refuse to? Do you see that?
Speaking on behalf of the women that we put into the industry, I think it's tougher as a woman to speak up for safety protocols, but that's just hearsay. That's just listening to their stories.
We've always been taught to, doing our JHAs in the morning time, to police one another. So if I see one of my fellow workers even walking down the shaftway or getting onto one of the decks without being tied up, we would stop them and say, what you're doing and why aren't you hooked up? We're there to help one another, and we're also there to make sure that we're all following the safety protocols that we know.
All right, thank you. Assembly Moya.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I want to thank you both for taking the time out of your day to come and testify on such an important issue. I want to also congratulate you on your hard work through the apprenticeship programs that are really proving to be an effective tool in this industry. for both of you, and in particular to you, Shirley, who has a very difficult road as a woman in this industry. I can say that you are someone that we should look at as a model to what is being done to change the image of what is happening in this industry now. So you should be applauded for your efforts in that.
She should, yes, thank you.
Now, Juan, I just wanted to go back to a question to you, which is, you alluded to the fact that it was through your apprenticeship and through your training that helped prevent this fatal fall.
Yes.
Correct? And it's clear, I think, that what we're seeing is the pattern. The better trained you are, the better equipped you are, the better chances you are of coming home at night.
Absolutely. I feel that through the schooling and the on-the-job training, it was the essential part of me being in the workforce and being on the job, because if I didn't know that, small things can happen that could escalate into a big thing. In my particular situation, I had installed and taken out many decks. When I say many, hundreds of decks I've put in, because that's part of my job. This is how we set our templates. This is how we drop our lines. This is how we begin to stack the rails and brackets in the shaft. And it was just knowing that before I step on that deck, before I take the barricades off, I need to be hooked up to the safety line. I can't emphasize it anymore. This is part of the first thing they teach you when you go to school.
Right, which is an important component to what I think we're trying to get at here at this hearing, because the statistic, again, that continues to keep coming up over and over again is that, again, while 41% of all construction workers in New York City identify themselves as Latino, 74% of construction fatality victims are Latino. And that is a startling figure. That is something that we need to correct. That is something that we as legislators and I think as this committee are committed to ensuring that that number is reduced, and that not just for the Latino community but for all the construction industry as a whole should not have to go through this anymore. I applaud you for your work and your service, but I also want to highlight that through the efforts of the folks that have been lobbying for this, but also through the great work of our chairwoman, we are looking to pass the Elevator Safety Act. It did come through the committee, and I think that we will be looking at this when we go back to Albany. But I want to thank both of you for taking the time out to come here and testify. I apologize that I missed the first part of the testimony, but thank you both.
Thank you for hearing me.
Wait.
I also want to